Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust. Broadcasting live presents Two Guys and a Bible with Don Preston and William Bell. Join us each week at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central as we bring you exciting, sound, challenging, and comforting messages regarding the end times. Thank you for tuning in today. Don Preston is the founder of Preterist Research Institute, or PRI. Don is a prolific author, having written and published 19 books, a host of audio and DVD studies, and is a debater and defender of the full preterist view. His websites are BibleProphecy.com, Eschatology.org, and DonKPreston.com. William Bell is the founder of AllThingsFulfilled.com Ministries and has a website bearing the same name, and has authored 3 books, audios, and DVDs. He has published hundreds of articles and recordings. And now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Two Guys and a Bible broadcast with Don Preston and William Bell.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I don't hear William. I heard the intro. There. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what the deal is. Maybe more of of these kind of ongoing technical problems that spring up with us from time to time. I do not know if I am being heard. I logged on. Everything seemed to be working just fine. But at the moment, I cannot hear William at all. So I do not know if I am on. And I don't have my phone with me at the moment either. So I will step away for a moment and get my phone. And Rod Rupert, if you're watching or if you're listening, send me a text, please. Thank you. All right, I am back. I have my phone. So, folks, if you can hear me, if I am online, someone please that has my phone number, send me a text and let me know. I have no indication that I am not online, but again, I cannot hear William Bell at all in case he is there somewhere. So I don't know what in the world has happened. The intro played just like it's supposed to, like when William is online and on air. And so, again, I don't really know what in the world is going on. But I'm going to proceed as if I'm on air and hope that my words don't simply go into the air. And William tells me that he is on, that he can hear me. It's just that we don't have any any connection between the two of us. William, since you are on, I'm going to reboot and come back on. All right? I'm logging off now.
That it does. There we are. I just needed to change my microphone setting, and he didn't give me a chance to do it before he checked out of here. I tried to send him a text, but he signed off immediately after he said it. I've been here all the time. I want to welcome you once again to Two Guys and a Bible, right here on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust. And while we are waiting for Dr. Don Preston to re-enter the studio. We just want to say good evening to you. Hope that you had a very relaxed and peaceful Labor Day and time off. I know for those of you who are maybe still, working, and we know a lot of you are, probably in the same age bracket that I am, or, close to it or older. And work is a thing of the past for you as far as, going to a job. And but nevertheless, still, there are many honeydews and everything else that you have to do around the house and other places. And so Don has sent me a message. Let me tell him. So he's trying to reboot his computer and everything. But anyway, we'll try to let him know in the process that everything is okay, and that next time he just needs to kind of hold his horses a little bit and not move so fast. Because, I do a lot of recordings, ladies and gentlemen. I did one today on Facebook that was about 2 hours, and I got to upload it to several social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, etc. And so my computer gets a lot of work out throughout the day. And sometimes what that does is because I'm using different formats, platforms to record. For example, I might use Zoom on one recording, another recording, I might go straight into the camera, then another recording I'm using, live on Facebook or whatever, and or doing, something else. And sometimes, and I have several microphones connected to my computer. And because of that, sometimes it just selectively chooses a camera or a microphone, and I'm not aware of which one it chooses. The one that I chose for Zoom earlier, was fine, but now when I get ready to do Blog Talk, it tends to choose another one, and so I had to, sit here and figure that out, which I did. But I heard Dunn from the very beginning, and you all couldn't hear me, but I was already on before he came on to speak, and so that's just the way it is with this technology and us, trying to get it together. But everything is fine. There was no problem with his computer. I hope he doesn't create one with trying to sign out and sign back in. I tried to get a message to him as quickly as I could to tell him everything was okay. And, unfortunately did not. And, but nevertheless, he should be back in soon. I know what it can be like, especially when you've signed into one of these social media platforms and then you sign out to try to come back in. Sometimes it's not as easy or smooth as you would like for it to be. It takes a ton of time, and you may run into some, connectivity issues in the process. So, and then all the while that I'm trying to communicate with him, people keep trying to tag me on Facebook, and that's the problem with these phones and all this multiple communication, multimedia communication deal. You can't even get a message through without somebody, trying to reach you. And so that's the way it is. But, we love it because technology is what allows us to get the message out and has allowed us to reach across platforms and around the world at little to no cost for the most part. And that is absolutely incredible. Couldn't have done this with newspaper or any other type of media in the past. Well, I see Dr. Preston has made it back in. We want to commend him for that, and then kind of slap his hand for moving so quickly before he could let me get the problem worked out. But nevertheless, we're here. Don, I was on all the time. Apparently, Blog Talk Radio just decided to choose a different mic than my studio mic using for the mixer, and I had to just figure that out. And I did by the time you were saying, okay, I'm going to sign out and reboot my computer, and I text you a message. You didn't get that, but I've been here the whole time, so everything's fine. And your audio is working fine. Everything's good.
Well, that's good. I tell you, I thought it was just one of those kind of arbitrary and capricious things, and evidently it was if they changed microphones on you without any kind of notification. But I was checking my mic levels, and everything seemed to be working properly here, and I'm thinking, well, okay, I don't know what in the world's going on. it's again, I thought it was just one of those things that pops up with Skype every once in a while. So I'm glad that we're both on. Glad everything's working at the moment. It's great to be back, of course. Hope everything is well in your world. It's certainly hectic in mine, and I know it is in yours. And been a good week. Of course, this is going to be a short week in some ways. I took yesterday as the Labor Day holiday. Managed to get out and work on one of my old vehicles. That was very relaxing. Kind of a good getaway. Enjoyed that a whole lot.
Well, that's very good. It was kind of a relaxing day for me on yesterday as well. I think I took quite a bit of that time, going back and forth in these discussions we've been having on Facebook. I got a chance to post some things on there, and it's almost hilarious, just kind of watching the dodgeball that's played in that arena. And but I know you've done some of that too as well. And yet I think, progress is being made as we go through. We're not seeing, a lot of the information that we're posting being really addressed. And I think some wise people are paying attention and seeing that, and I think it'll bear fruit in time. So I'm grateful for that. The rest, we just kind of kicked back. The family came over a little bit and spent a little time, and that was it. So it's been pretty much a relaxing day mixed with some work. Yeah, exactly. Well, you mentioned those exchanges on Facebook, and like you said, what we're seeing there is a whole lot of dodgeball. These ministers come on there, and they accuse us of being everything in the world except Christians. We evidently qualify to be the Antichrist in their estimation. But the trouble of it is, when you just openly expose the fallacy of their claims, all of a sudden they will not answer the questions. You have challenged Kyle Mazingale, for instance, I don't even know how many times, to answer some really simple questions on Daniel chapter 12. I have likewise challenged him to answer some questions on Daniel chapter 12, and he absolutely refuses. And so when you have a text that is explicitly addressing the issue of the resurrection of the dead, and when that text contains elements in it that, number one, Jesus emphatically and specifically applied to the first century. And by the way, even these ministers who are attacking William and me are from the churches of Christ, and the traditional view in the churches of Christ is that these passages in Daniel are applied by Jesus to the time and events leading up to the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. Well, of course, historically, these brethren and in the churches of Christ, there has been an absolute ignorance, and I mean an absolute ignorance of the reality that not only does Jesus apply some of Daniel chapter 12 to the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, I should say to the events leading up to that judgment and his coming. But Daniel chapter 12 is so clear, so explicit, so emphatic that all of the things that he predicted, including the Great Tribulation, yes, in the churches of Christ, that has to do with the first century leading up to the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. But Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, immediately follows verse 1. Verse 1 is the Great Tribulation. And Daniel chapter 12, verse 2 is the resurrection. And Daniel chapter 12, verse 7 emphatically, explicitly posits the fulfillment of, quote, all of these things, which includes the Great Tribulation, the resurrection, the time of the end, the righteous shining forth in the kingdom. All of those things, not some, not even most, all of those things
are posited to be fulfilled at the time when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered. And so when William and I have asked, when we have challenged these ministers to tell us, when did the Great Tribulation take place? Total silence. When and where does Jesus posit the fulfillment of all of those things, which of necessity, contextually, grammatically, linguistically, includes the resurrection? Where does Daniel posit the fulfillment of all of those things? Absolute total silence. Instead, they go off on another tirade, accusing us of other and more heresies, but not once will they even attempt to answer the questions. Now, you've challenged Kyle Mazingale probably 3 times to answer the question. I've challenged him 4 times. Oh, yeah, I'm sure. I've challenged him no less than 4 times, today included, and still not so much as a keystroke of response. Now, folks, if that doesn't tell you something about the fact that Kyle Mazingale, his running mate there, at least on Facebook, Scott Russell, and the others that are on there chiming in with him, when every one of them adamantly refuse to answer questions that are based on the statements of the text, then you know very good well that they cannot look themselves in the mirror and believe that they're dealing honestly with the text. There's just simply no way that they can believe that they are. So it's been rather enlightening. It's been and is rather amazing to engage with these guys. And again, the strange thing about it is, the ironic and sad thing about it is, William Bell and I are the ones affirming exactly and precisely what the text says, yet we are being called the heretics. Now, isn't that ironic? And yet, that's exactly what's happening. So, anyway, yeah, it's a fascinating exchange, and of course, another interesting thing about it is, folks, William and I have and do impress upon everyone the need to understand Hebraic thought. Well, just recently, Kyle Mazingale challenged me to provide some scholars who support the concept of Hebraic thought in regard to resurrection. I gave some of those quotes. I acknowledged in the quotes, that even though one of them believes in a future resurrection, that he gave no supporting context, supporting biblical text to support his claims. But he did say that the original concept, the original Hebraic view of resurrection was of a corporate reality. Not individual bodies coming out of the grave, but a corporate resurrection and national restoration. He goes ahead to say that concept was changed to speak of individual bodies coming out of the grave, but he never gave any proof for it. He never gave a single verse. He never gave any proof whatsoever. Well, when I pointed that out, Mr. Mazingale comes back and simply tries to argue, well, Mr. Levinson is a futurist. Well, big deal. I pointed that out myself. And William went ahead and pointed out several massive discrepancies in their use of Levinson and John Collins and some of these other scholars. And they completely ignore every single thing that William and I point out in regard to what these scholars are saying. And then they just continue repeating their little mantra about, and again, the reality of it is, they have literally scoffed and ridiculed William Bell and me for appealing to the necessity of understanding Hebraic thought. Now, all of a sudden, guess what? They're saying we have to understand Hebraic thought. And William and I
Yeah,
are
they're
going, yeah.
They're trying to turn the tables, Don. They're trying to now say they are advocating Hebraic thought and we're advocating Grecian thought. I thought it was so interesting.
Yes. I mean, it's when I read the very first round of that, in which Kyle Mazingale said that we are appealing to Grecian thought, I literally sat back in my chair going, wait a minute, what just happened here? I just laughed and I laughed and I laughed because of the utter fallacy of what he was saying. He was saying that we are appealing to Grecian thought when from the very get-go, we are the ones appealing to Hebraic thought. He is the one appealing to Hebraic thought. Grecian thought. Yes. And so I tell you, as William said on the phone to me the other day, he's just having so much fun doing this. Well, I am too. I mean, in a lot of ways, these guys are not even presenting what you would call a solid argument on any level. I mean, they are just all over the map, literally. And again, when you point out their utter inconsistencies, their contradiction of the Scripture, like Kyle Mazingale said in a post yesterday, that Christ, through his death, abolished the death consequence of Adam's sin. And I'm going, thank you very much. You just became a full preterist. Now, I didn't write that, but that's what I was thinking. And then he said, we do not die as a result of our sin. I'm going, well, once again, thank you very much for, presenting a full preterist view. And then he went ahead once again. Folks, this shows you the confusion. This shows you the rampant confusion and self-contradiction of these men. He turned right around and says that today we die as a direct result of consequence of Adam's sin. And I'm going, wait a minute, you just said Christ abolished the consequence of Adam's sin. So do we die as a result of Adam or do we not? So I posted this morning, I said, you got a major problem here, Kyle Mazingale. According to Paul, we do not die as a result of Adam's sin. We die because of our own sin. Man does not die because Adam sinned. All men die because all men sin. Period. End of story. Adam introduced sin into the world. But all men follow Adam into death by sinning themselves. Not because they inherit the sin or the death of Adam. And I pointed out that, Kyle Mazingale has gone completely full-blown Calvinist. And here he is, a member of the Church of Christ, supposedly resisting Calvinism with every ounce of his being. So if men die as a direct consequence of Adam's sin and Adam's death, then that must mean, without any shadow of a doubt, guess what, folks? That means that when a baby dies, they are dying the direct result of Adam's sin and Adam's death. They inherit Adam's death, not through any sin of their own, just simply by being born into this world. Well, if that's true, then how in the world can he say Christ has removed the death consequence of Adam's sin? I mean, it's literally astounding how these guys refuse to see the consequence and the implications of their own doctrines. I mean, it really is it's astounding. And it's sad in a way because they're setting themselves up to be the so-called champions of the truth, defending tradition, defending orthodoxy, and yet they argue against themselves every time they set their fingers to the keyboard. They contradict themselves. So that's what William Bell and I have been dealing with on Facebook over the last several days.
Yeah, you mentioned something that they continue to contradict themselves. You know, I said a long, long time ago that because of their lack of the perspective that preterism gives you when you understand it and you get that framework together, you can see very quickly when arguments, go across the line, when they go outside of the box or out of bounds, et cetera. You can see them, almost instantaneously. And I know you recognize them very quickly. And I can see them. And it's like, I remember one of the guys who survived that plane crash in the Andes mountain when they had to, live in the snow for a while. Well, anyway, he was one of the survivors, and he told the story. And he said when they were, I think it was two of them, when they started climbing their way out of that, after they decided they couldn't stay there and they had to, try to get some help, and they started to climb a mountain. And man, I tell you, to hear him describe it was just absolutely incredible. Everybody was sitting on the edge of their seats. You just couldn't believe what he was saying. And they're climbing this mountain in this ice with their fingers and their toes and stuff like that, or at least, I guess they had boots on or whatever, but still with their fingers and just one, breathtaking, just treacherous grasp or step at a time, that they're going. And they got to the top of the mountain as they were doing it. And then as soon as they got to the top of the mountain, there was another mountain behind it that they couldn't even see from that one. And they had to climb that one as well. And the fortitude that they had to have in order to survive that situation. And then they said when they got down to the other side, it was just like, summer, bright and sunny and beautiful and everything. And that's how they got rescued. But the point that I'm making with that is these guys can't see. They can't, there's so many minds in the field. There's so many blinders out there because of their futurism that they jump on these passages and they think they have an answer. And then the very passage that they're using just destroys them totally. And that's exactly what's happening in these conversations, that have occurred. And I just sit back and I'm totally in amazement and just wonder at, the statements that they make and all of the missteps that they make in trying to refute it. And then, they have a cheer squad out there that every time they get caught, their cheerleaders have to come in and say, well, you see, they are right anyway. They haven't answered any questions. They're contradicting themselves left and right. They're butchering the historical sources, but they're still right.
That's exactly precisely what goes on. And it's incredible to witness that, like you said, when they can't even realize that the verses that they're appealing to are destroying the very argument that they made. My father, when I was a very young man, my father would train me and try to train me in analytical thought and argumentation and what have you. And my father used to tell me, he said, anytime somebody makes an argument and gives you a text, what you need to do is go to that text and its context. And if their argument is false, you will almost always find in the very text that they appeal to the refutation of the argument that they're making. And that, I have found that to be true so very often throughout time. And that's precisely what you and I are seeing right now in discussing with these people. When they will make an appeal to, like Romans 5 and Kyle Nightingale's appeal to it. And interestingly enough, he didn't actually quote Romans 5:12. He just alluded to Romans 5. But once again, just like my father used to tell me, when you go to the text that they appeal to, however ambiguously they may appeal to it, you find right there how wrong they are, how horribly they are misusing the text. And again, the irony here is, folks, you have to understand that Kyle Masingale and Scott Russell are absolutely not Calvinists. And yet they were making, right there on Facebook today, making Calvinistic arguments that they would, on any other occasion, absolutely categorically reject as heresy. And yet here they are making those arguments against us today. Now, I haven't been back on today to see if Kyle responded to anything that I posted, so I don't know if he did or not. I'll probably check it in the morning. But all of that said, it doesn't negate the fact that he was making Calvinistic arguments. He'll probably come back and follow suit of what he's done in the past, saying, I am not teaching Calvinism. Well, anytime you teach that I die as a direct result of Adam, yes, you are. You are absolutely affirming the Calvinism. And as usual, I am assuming that he will completely ignore the argument about why babies die, based upon the argument that he made. The argument that he made was, all men die because we inherit the consequence, the death consequence of Adam's sin. We don't, we don't die because we inherit Adam's sin. Okay? That's Kyle Masingale's position. We do not die because we inherit Adam's sin. We just get the death that he introduced into the world. We inherit death even though we may not have sinned. Infants inherit the death introduced by Adam, even those infants never sinned. So, boy, you talk about almost an unfair situation, seems to me.
And we inherit it in view of the fact that we have been forgiven of sin.
Exactly where I was going. In spite of the fact that we are supposedly forgiven of sin, and thus not under the penalty and consequence of sin, yet according to Kyle Masingale, we inherit the death of Adam, okay, even though we did not inherit his sin, and we die because we inherit the death, and we die even though we're forgiven of sin. The wages of sin is death, but even though we're forgiven and therefore should not have any consequences or penalty of sin in our life, yet we do receive the wages of sin in spite of the fact that Christ died to take away our sin, and thus, ostensibly, the consequence of our sin. I mean, this is such a mishmash of error, of confusion. As I am fond of saying, when I read his post, I say, that's both confused and confusing. It is absolutely horrible. But again, they refuse to see it. So, again, folks, that's what William and I deal with on almost a daily basis, trying to answer our critics in such a way. And look, chances of changing Kyle Masingale and Scott Russell are extremely slim. Extremely slim. Their minds are made up. They're not going to admit that they were wrong, no matter what. Okay? But there are other people who are monitoring and auditing these discussions who will see and can see very easily the fallacy of their arguments and will come to understand the truth. So that's a whole lot of why William and I continue to engage people like this, in spite of the fact that it's never pleasant to be called a heretic and to be ridiculed so profusely, so profoundly, and yet, that's just part of the process. So we do it, and people learn, and people change.
That is absolutely correct, and it happens pretty much on every platform, whether we're dealing with those guys in the Church of Christ or Hebrew Israelites or others in other, denominational groups. It's the same story over and over again. What this does, as you said, is it gives us the opportunity to get the word out and to have people to view it from different perspectives. That has certainly been the case, with the now, terminated discussion I was having with Michael Holloway. But, it brought out so many, other points that were good, and I'm glad that it happened because I've almost done a complete study of 1 Corinthians 15 that I'm going to either publish one way or the other on video and possibly in a book that I'm really, really, pleased with. I've been just waiting to put this information down on paper and just haven't had, I guess, the motivation to do it, consistently all the way through. And yet when you get into a discussion and a controversial discussion like this, I don't know, for some reason it just heightens your, your inspiration, your motivation, and your thinking ability that you can see these things clearly because you have to in order to respond to the arguments, et cetera. And when that happens, some great things happen. You come up with material and insights that you didn't have before. And that's what makes it good. And so to be able to share that information, I think is going to be good for, the Predators community, at least hopefully so.
Oh, I'm convinced that it will. I know one of the charts that you have shared with me is absolutely profound. As I mentioned to you on the phone, I think it's one of the best charts I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it is absolutely fantastic. And so I can't wait to see you develop this. I want to see it in a book. I want to see this PowerPoint book that I suggested to you earlier today. I just think it's a fantastic idea, considering all the material that you put on. And, you made a comment there, William, that I think is absolutely important. And it's something that I found to be true in my personal experience. And you said that there's something about the engagement and controversy that sharpens the senses. It causes us to focus and to think. I have said many, many times down through the years, there's absolutely nothing like preparing for a formal public debate or a formal debate of any kind that forces a person to do the kind of study that helps us to understand better. When you know and when you realize that truth is on the line and that you want the truth, that it's not about winning an argument, it's about the truth. And so what you do is you look at every single possible argument that you have read or heard from your, opponent, and you analyze that from every possible angle that you can conceive of. That's good for you. That forces us to think, okay, if I make the following argument, how will they respond? If they respond, how will I respond? I mean, I find myself doing that constantly, trying to be as analytical, trying to be as thorough, trying to be as objective and honest as I possibly can be with the evidence that is there. And I have found myself many, many times going down a given road thinking, hey, I think I've got an argument here, only to run up against the testimony of the scriptures that said, no, that's not a good argument. I've had to completely discard it and start all over again. And I know you've done exactly the same thing. You think you have a good, solid argument? When you look at the actual biblical testimony and evidence, you go, well, that's not a very good argument after all. I sure don't want to use that because it's not true. And so preparing for a debate is some of the most, number one, it's difficult. Number two, it's challenging. And number three, it is extremely rewarding because it forces a person, again, to be as analytical as possible, to be as thorough as possible, not just simply to assume, this argument is this argument is that, this argument will work. No, no, no. If you're going to be an honest student of God's Word, if you're going into the debate with the objective, number one, of understanding God's Word better, and number two, of presenting that in a cogent, lucid, logical, and convincing way, then it's going to be what I just said. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be hard work. It's going to be every single thing that maybe you never thought that it would be. I mean, it's really going to put you to the test.
Yeah, let me add one other thing about, that preparation as well. That's why it's so important to do as much research and investigation as you can on your opponent and their position. You try to know it at least as well or better than they do. And prior to the discussion, with Michael Holloway, he I don't know why he did, but I spent a lot of that time asking him questions to draw out what he really believed. And that helped tremendously, because if I hadn't done that, I would have been making arguments that were just kind of throwing darts against the wall, hoping that some of them would stick. But as a result of, those dialogues and all those questions that, it took me a while to get some answers, but once I got them, it made everything so much easier, and I could fine tune. And not only that, but you get, prior commitments to certain passages that they can't say, like in the middle of a discussion, well, that's not what I really meant or whatever, because now you got them documented with that. It's important to do that as well, and it helps very much. And then sometimes if you do it, you may decide, okay, well, we don't even need to debate that. Here are some points of agreement that we have. And I had a young man on today from California, and we spent about 2 hours in a discussion. Well, prior to the discussion, I asked him, I said, well, what's your background? He says, well, I'm about 80% preterist. I said, well, that's good. I said, well, what is it with that additional 20% that perhaps we could discuss and see where we can bridge the gap? And he said, well, I'd be interested. He threw out a few things, that he had, and most of them were easily, answerable as far as the doctrine was concerned. Even though they took a little bit of a twist once we got on the line, but still he did cover some things that were common misunderstandings about the preterist view, et cetera. And we had an opportunity to discuss them. But my aim in going into that, and I told him that, and some of the people that saw the dialogue, I said, look, I don't disagree with the person just for the sake of disagreeing with them. I said, they may have something that they can teach me. And so I'm always open, even in the dialogue that I'm having with them. What can I learn from you? What is it that you're saying that, maybe I didn't see, or what's the angle you're coming from that I haven't looked at? Because that angle may give me an insight to some truth that I have overlooked or didn't quite understand, et cetera. And of course, that happened. And I remember having another discussion with the guy from that community, who was very, very respectful and kind gentleman, and this guy was as well today. And that was, he pointed out something from the Wisdom of Solomon that said righteousness is immortality. And it's the moment he said it, it just, my antenna went up like you couldn't believe, and I stopped him right there. I said, wait a minute. I said, repeat that statement. And when he repeated it, I wrote it down, I took a note of it, and I tell you, I've used it. Because it says what the New Testament says. Righteousness. Yes, exactly. And I thought, hey, this is good stuff. And I let him know that, and he appreciated it as well because, we were having a dialogue. We weren't arguing against each other. We were discussing with each other, even though we had points and counterpoints along the way. And we still have, just like today, both of us agreed that we would have another discussion. And everybody, I got tons of compliments from people who heard that first discussion. This one today got cut off from Facebook, even though I recorded the whole thing, so I still have it, and I'm going to upload it. Later, I'll upload the audio to one of the social media networks, and then I'll do the video as well. But, it's there. And so it'll help other people who are looking and trying to figure it out, because they are now asking questions that they used not to ask. and which is good. They're seeing some things. And let me say this in the process. He was thinking, just like we have been charged before when we've talked to dispensationalists, particularly when they said we have a very one-sided view of Israel. We're always talking. I think this even came up in your debate with Dr. Brown, Dr. Michael Brown. We're always saying that, Israel is being destroyed, and we don't have any restoration or blessing for Israel. And he brought that point up, which I make it with them all the time because they always want to say, well, we're in bondage and everything. And so I said, look, did you really read the text that said some of them were redeemed and some entered the kingdom, et cetera, et cetera? So he brought the point up today. He said, well, look, you can't lump all of Israel together. And I said, well, that is true. And so he went on to explain why you couldn't, because there were some, who believed, and so not all of them. So, and I said, look, man, I've been trying to get this point across for a couple of years now to that community. And so he acknowledged it, and then I just went in and added some more verses under it. But, maybe once the fact that he's acknowledged it, other people who are in that community will see the point that I've tried to make with them over time. And what was interesting, though, he prefaced, you have to just get a bang out of this. He prefaced our discussion in his comments today. He says, look, all the rest of you guys have dropped the ball with William Bell. He says, I'm going to show you how to do it. I thought that was pretty neat.
Oh, yeah.
So they'll have to deal with that.
Yeah. Well, we see that kind of an attitude very, very often when people, they may not express it in quite those terms, but very good and well that they come on and say, well, nobody else can do what I'm about to do. I'm going to show these predators, what's wrong. And they last about 15 minutes and then they disappear. But that sounds like a really, really profitable exchange that you've been having there. And that's absolutely great. It's just another example of how more and more people are coming to see that there are genuine challenges to the traditional views that cannot be answered by traditional eschatology. They just simply have no answers. And preterism is truly the only view that can answer these challenges. I know on the Now TV network, you did, I don't know if you finished it yet or not, but you did a series on why the study of prophecy is important. Well, I'm doing a series, my introductory series is the challenge of Christ. Jesus said, and you and I discussed this with countless numbers of people when we were going to Abilene Christian University and we had a booth there. We confronted them with the challenge of Christ. And that challenge of Christ is in John 10, 35 to 37, where Jesus said, do not believe me for my words' sake, believe me for my works' sake. If I do not do the works which my Father has given me, do not believe me. So here is the challenge of Christ. And I got to tell you, you know it, I know it, countless other people realize it. That the Muslims, the Jews, the atheists all realize that Jesus predicted his coming for the first century. And they say he didn't do it. Therefore, he failed. And since he failed, he cannot be the Son of God. He cannot be the Messiah. And amillennialism can't answer that. Postmillennialism can't answer that. Dispensationalism cannot answer that. Only covenant eschatology, only preterism has the answer to that challenge. Jesus issues the challenge. If I do not do what the Father gave me to do not believe me. The challenge was, well, what did the Father give him to do? The Father gave him judgment, resurrection, his coming. Has he done it or not? it seems to me like this challenge of Christ is so commonly ignored by a great number of Christians who just gloss right over it as if it doesn't even exist. And say, well, we're supposed to believe in spite of the fact that we can't show where he kept his word. Well, I'll guarantee you what, the Muslims, the Jews, and the atheists are acutely aware of Jesus' challenge. They are acutely aware of Jesus' predictions about his coming. And when Christians find themselves unable to answer the question, did Jesus keep his word? Then the atheists, the Jews, and the Muslims win. And you and I experienced that realization at Tulsa some years ago when we were privileged to talk with large numbers of college students, young people, going to college, being confronted by atheistic professors, having no answer from their traditional views, having no answers at all. But when we would provide them the answers, show them how to answer that, they were just absolutely ecstatic. And of course, the tragedy was we would actually witness them sharing those thoughts, sharing the answer to Jesus' challenge with their preachers or elders, and being informed, do not go back over and talk to those men. Stay away from those guys.
Yeah.
I mean, folks, we witnessed this for ourselves. And it's so sad that here is a paradigm, the all-millennial paradigm, that has no answer for the challenge of Christ. None. Zero. Zilch. And these young people are going off to college. They're being confronted with the challenge of Jesus. And their tradition of the all-millennial world gives them no answer. And this is one of the reasons, it's certainly not the only reason. I mean, they're being indoctrinated in atheistic evolution. They're being indoctrinated in secular humanism. They're being indoctrinated in everything that is anti-Christian. But I'll guarantee you, one of the failures of the traditional paradigm is the failure to deal with the challenge of Christ. They have not, they are not, and they cannot deal with the challenge of Christ when it comes to eschatology. And that is just an incredibly sad reality. And again, what I started to say, it's one of the reasons, not the only one to reiterate, but it's one of the reasons why almost 60% of young people who go off to college leave the church. Now think about that, folks. Almost 60% of young people who go off to college leave church. They abandon Christianity. And preachers, elders refuse to acknowledge, refuse to even try to deal with the fact that part of the reason they are abandoning Christianity is because of what they are confronting at college, and that is the perceived failure of Jesus, the perceived false prophecies of Jesus. The atheistic professors who tell them, your Jesus failed. Your Jesus was a liar. And their preachers haven't given them answers. Their elders haven't given them answers. Their parents haven't given them answers. Their traditions, their church hasn't given them answers. And since they don't have any answers and can't find answers, they're left floundering, grasping, and they abandon the faith. And yet, It's so exciting, invigorating, wonderful to hear from these very kind of young people and individuals who have basically lost their faith as a result of the teaching of failed eschatology in the church and across all denominations. They have come to realize, they've discovered covenant eschatology. And as a result of that, their faith is renewed. Their love of the Lord is renewed. They are finding themselves in love with God and with Christ and His Word all over again. And there's nothing like the thrill of hearing from people like that who contact us. They contact William, they contact me. I'm sure that they contact other teachers of covenant eschatology as well, and express their profound appreciation for sharing the truth of fulfilled eschatology. No failed Messiah, no uninspired word, not a Jesus who lied or was mistaken or was deluded. No. We can stand up and we can confidently say to the world, as I was sharing with he's a real estate agent here in town, and he's a Baptist fellow. He had actually been confronted by some Muslims. And he told me, he said, Don, I don't have an answer for him. I don't know what to tell him. I said, let me share with you the answer. And he was stunned. He was literally just blown away. And it was like, well, why haven't I known this? I said, well, that's because your church doesn't teach this. And I said, the bottom line is, Tom, Jesus wins because Jesus kept His word. We don't have to apologize for Jesus. We don't have to say, well, I know that's what He predicted, and I don't have an explanation for that, but I believe in Him anyway. We don't have to say stuff like that. We can stand up and confidently and boldly say to the world, Jesus did not fail. Your refusal or your failure to understand Hebraic thought, Hebraic literature, Hebraic apocalyptic language lies at the root of your false accusation against Jesus. If you understand apocalyptic language, if you understand covenantal language, you would never, ever accuse Jesus of failing. You would realize and you would know He did not fail. He kept His word. He came in the glory of the Father exactly and precisely like He said He was going to. And so, here, our mission here on Two Guys in the Bible, here on Fulfilled Radio, a voice you can trust, is to just keep telling people. The challenge of Christ is there. It's an undeniable challenge. The question is, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to answer the challenge of Christ? Are you going to keep repeating the same old false narrative of futurism that says, oh, well, Jesus didn't really say He was coming back in the first century. The apostles didn't really mean that the coming of the Lord was at hand. No. None of that language means anything. And people who are linguists, people who are good students, people who can read the Greek dictionaries know that is a charade of an argument. They know it's a false argument. They know there is no merit to it whatsoever. And they literally turn their back on that kind of nonsensical argumentation, as they well should. They should just simply realize Jesus not only said He was coming back in that generation, He did so in the same way that the Father had come many, many times before. And, well, William, it appears that we are out of time. Didn't get got a whole lot covered on, on the Messianic temple. I don't know how in the world that happened. But anyway, we'll pick it up next week. In the meantime, folks, thanks so much for joining us here on Two Guys in the Bible on Fulfilled Radio, a voice you can trust. And with that, I will say good night and God bless.
Thank you for joining the Two Guys in a Bible radio broadcast. On behalf of Dunn Preston and myself, we'd like to say have a very pleasant day and may God bless. Until next time, we'll see you on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust.